and welcome to MedCity News' Pivot Podcast. I'm your host, Orundhati Parmar. AI has been spreading exponentially across all aspects of human life, and the healthcare industry is no exception. However, the bar for usefulness and safety of AI applications in healthcare is especially high for obvious reasons. In today's episode, we are going to speak to three experts who will delve deep into the AI applications in healthcare that have the most potential while also separating hype from reality. The experts are Serge Perra, CIO of Abarca Health, which is a modern pharmacy benefits manager, Ton Roulans, Chief Technology and Innovation Officer for Trexin Consulting, which is a management consulting and technology solutions firm. And last but not least, Bertil Chapuis, co-founder and CEO of Extillion, which is an AI engineering and solutions firm. This episode is sponsored by Abarca Health. Welcome to all of you to MedCity's Pivot Podcast.
Thank you.
So Serge, let's start with you. As with all new technologies, there's a certain hype around AI. What types of applications do you think symbolize that hype?
Oh gosh, where to begin? So many opportunities and being part of the hype cycle right now. It's the list is long, but I can highlight a few that I think are relevant. One would be sort of these super agents or agents that do everything for you. Schedule your meals or manage your calendar, filter your email, do all these things, right? Order your groceries. Probably another one of interest is these generative media or one-click type media solutions where, type in, build me a movie, and all of a sudden, I've got an award-winning, Oscar-winning movie. And then the third one would be like, I guess there's startups right now sort of promising fully automated solutions, right? The AI CEO, the AI product owner, across the board. And I think, all of these, the vision is sort of outpacing kind of where we are right now. And the common thread, what I think of anyways, is that, we don't have the ability to essentially, say 5 words and actually get a completely baked solution, right? We're not there yet. It's not completely generalized AI as of today anyway.
Mm-hmm. So Dan, what are some common misconceptions about AI applications in healthcare?
Well, how long do we have? I mean, it's a big, it's a big list. But I think if you just say AI in healthcare, right, that's already a big thing because AI is so broad, right? There's so many different areas. So I think it's all about risk and reliability within billing and ops automation, clinical prediction models, and it's really having a risk mindset. I think that is, having that risk mindset. So AI in healthcare is a misconception. You really have to go deep down to find a common solution. The other misconception is really there's two that I want to mention that I stick out. One is, AI will replace clinicians, right? Well, that's not true, right? I mean, for now it's augmentation, right? But I think what you see is that augmentation with AI, gives that risk of automation bias, right? People start to rely on technology. So we're letting our guard down a little bit. I think that is kind of an area where, there's a lot of work needs to be done there. And what I like, maybe very American, bigger models, right? More data equals, safer care, right? Well, that's not true, right? It's all around data quality, the context of your data, the metadata labeling, and the constraints around it, right? So, and raw scale is really not an indicator of better, right? Or safer care. So it's really everything is data quality. So I think those are some of the ones I would like to call out.
So we'll talk about replacement augmentation in just a little bit. You jumped the gun there a little bit for me, but I'm glad you brought it up. It is such a big topic. But before we go there, can you describe some meaningful use cases for AI in healthcare? We talked about the hype. Let's now talk about what's actually working.
Yeah. So I mentioned three. One is something that I think a lot of people are talking about already. Things like automating the prior authorization process, which is a huge issue in the industry. And there's real progress being made on that front to apply agentic systems to prior auth in a way that can dramatically reduce
Mm-hmm.
cycle times without without denying anybody anything, right? Just on the approval side of the equation. So that's one, and that is happening in multiple places today. The other one that I think is quite exciting is applying agents to triaging in a provider context, where we know that there's a massive capacity issue for clinicians. I mean, a dearth of clinician time in the system, and agentic triaging has offers a real promise of guiding patients to synchronous care or an inpatient, an in-doctor visit, and so on, in a way that could really result in clinician time being spent on the cases that really require human attention. So that there's experiments going on that front. I mean, I don't think this is I am not aware of a production level deployment of triaging, but it's clearly in the proof of concept phase in a number of places. And then the third, which is maybe a little more in the background, but I think is going to make a huge impact in the industry, is the use of AI to actually help payers, providers, PBMs modernize their infrastructure. So, healthcare infrastructure is one of the big barriers to innovation. Both data, the fragmentation of data, but also just legacy systems that, the cost of modernizing being, having been a huge barrier in the past, and with the use of AI in development, I think there's an opportunity to compress the cost of those migrations and of automating the data integration. So I actually think this is where perhaps in the midterm, AI may have some of the biggest impact, is to actually enable healthcare to move to modern data infrastructures that then enable all the innovation from the huge number of innovators out there to plug in and start providing value.
And Serge, let me ask for a quick sort of clarification. Because AI is so overhyped these days, a lot of companies that have been doing RPA, robotic process automation, are now talking about themselves as they are AI. So how do you, for someone who may not know the difference, how would you sort of classify them? Not all automation is AI.
No, absolutely not. I mean, like you said, RPA has been around for quite some time, and that repeatable process, I think, is actually extremely beneficial. Certainly don't want to take anything away from what RPA can do, and I think it still has a very large place in our industries. But when you talk about AI, it's about being able to make non-deterministic or deterministic decisions around data that hasn't been orchestrated ahead of time. Right, the ability to on the fly or on demand orchestrate answers and or aggregation of data or insights that would otherwise not have been anticipated. So when you think about classic software development, RPA, again, I'll fit that into that as well, is that computers are very good at doing exactly what we tell them to do, and that results in decision trees and decision matrices and whatnot that have to be preordained, if you will, before the system can operate. AI is now, what about all the corner cases that we have not anticipated? What about all the things that we don't specifically understand, but can provide guardrails or guidance? And the AI can then make those decisions based on that guidance, very much like you would expect from an individual or a professional that works within your organization to be able to do. right?
What
I think one of the
things?
one of the things that we've seen many times when it comes to RPA, initiatives is that you start digging around about the process and you realize how much of it is determined by the, colloquial knowledge or, tribal knowledge that maybe individuals have within their minds. And so that's where that space of AI
Mhm.
can really provide a lot of value.
So I'll stick with you. That's the perfect segue to how you guys are designing AI within Abarca. Can you talk a little bit about your design philosophy and how you're sort of leveraging AI?
Sure. I think Wilton and Bertil alluded to it, like data first and understanding like large models are not necessarily the answer. But let's start with the data piece. Like the way we've looked at it is that, uh, you know, back to the hype question, a lot of these ideas about taking 4 words and expanding that into an entire business clearly is a bridge too far. So solid engineering practices cannot be, circumvented in this particular case. So number one, our philosophy is let's get the data right, right? That's something that's probably shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. That you get the value of that regardless of whether you're doing AI or not. But it is sort of a precursor, and the reason is, bad data, garbage in, garbage out. But also an AI, if it is to make determinations, must also have access to that information in a way that it's congruent and consistent. Secondly, break the problems down. Like that's the other piece of the way we're looking at things is that unlike, again, taking a very generalistic approach, we're approaching things much more use case based. And again, the right tool for the right job. Good example of that is, and when you think about how do you solve the problem of bringing information together that again isn't necessarily in one repository and making decisions on it. PA process that Bertil, alluded to is part of that. It's not always that easy for us to aggregate the information. And if it was, or if it was, already preordained, if you will, or standardized in the non-standardized format and world that we live in healthcare, this problem would already be solved, right? So that's the other piece of it is enabling that. And then finally, a lot of guardrails. And I think, when you don't have the governance or the ideas around how to make sure that you're getting the answers that you need and testing for those, right, with ground-based, truth, you're destined to get answers that may look really good, but are generally hallucinations or maybe not what we need. So those are kind of some of the pillars that we're considering in our solutions.
So again, Chan, good segue into governance and guardrails, right? Those are the key, and especially the bar is so high in healthcare, right? So I'm wondering, what are some of the guardrails that we must have to even in the world of PBMs and pharmacy that you guys are in, especially surges in? What are the types of guardrails you would advise folks to?
Well, yeah, it's a great question, right? And again, I don't think it's that straightforward over times, but if we talk about, right, governance and guardrails, so governance is who owns the risk, right? And the guardrails are how do we keep the risk within limits, right? So how do we control that, right? So that's a constant balancing act, especially with AI.
Right.
And in healthcare is also the question, not is the model good or is my data good, but also is how do we keep it good over time? And I think that's where governance and guardrails come in, because what works now, you have shift in population, you have shift in workflow, your data changes over time, models change over time. So what works now, maybe 6 weeks or 12 weeks from now, might give you an answer you don't expect. So I think that's where governance starts to really play a big role. Now, the other thing that I see, in the olden days, governance was always a little bit of an afterthought, right? You did, oh yeah, we need to have governance. But I think with AI, its governance need to even start before you buy or build, right? You need to start thinking about what's the use case, what's the use, what's the risk, what's the exposure, who's accountable before you even start, because that also mandates a lot of the decision you're going to make, right? And then, misconception with guardrails at times is, especially in healthcare, is, one of our rules is we're covered. We don't use PHI. We told our LLMs, right, don't use PHI data, personal health information, right? So we can't use it. But that's not what it is. Guardrails are really an end-to-end data controls. You kind of need to have that security mindset, right? What does it access? When does it access? Who accesses? How are the user prompts and outputs are handled to make sure you control that. And that's really the thing about governance. It's a very active process.
Right.
Unlike your traditional ones where you have maybe, a regular cadence, but in AI, it's a very proactive process. And then the other thing that we were typically not so good in other industries, but AI is driving in healthcare is really transparency. Transparency is not optional, right? Because you're working with patients, you're working with outcomes, be it, on whatever payer, PBM, doesn't really matter. Lives are at stake. So you want to make sure that there's a solid audit trail. Where did that decision come from? Where did the answer come from? What data was used? How did it? And that's a lot of work, right? It's not just typing in a prompt. That's a lot of groundwork that, Abarca has gone through to make sure that, the output is reliable. And governance is really a big deal in AI.
But technology is supposed to remove friction, and yet in healthcare, it seems to me that it adds to the friction, right? I mean, think about EHRs and how physicians and health systems have now reluctantly accepted as because they feel like they have no choice but to do so. So I'm wondering whether you think what AI needs to do to avoid that fate. Do you think there's a thoughtful use of AI that can actually remove friction in healthcare overall?
Yeah, no, in fact, I think that is if I were to coin a tagline for the real potential of AI in healthcare, it is to humanize healthcare, right? And if you talked about EHRs, when you go to see a doctor these days, a lot of times the doctor is sitting in front of the computer inputting data to fulfill a bunch of bureaucracy right behind the scenes, rather than spending the time with the patient. And so all these technologies, I mean, ambient, all of the automation behind the scenes, the triaging I mentioned earlier. I think at the end of the day, the promise is for this to release, humans into being able to do what they do best, which is engage with people, and in this case, patients. So yes, absolutely. And look, I think this is going to be a long journey. And there's a lot of infrastructure work that needs to be done. I think we're still at the phase where everybody's focused on the bright, shiny objects at the kind of at the tip of the iceberg. And now comes the deep work to actually enable that. So, but I think there's real promise, and then the other is the economics, right? I mean, as a nation, we spend $1.4 billion on just the administrative side of healthcare. Can you imagine compressing that, even by 30% or half the amount of resources that could be released for better use?
So expanding upon that, Serge, if you could talk about specifically in healthcare where we can reduce friction, especially in the PBM payer provider worlds.
Sure. I mean, Bertil, highlighted the key word there, the humanization, if you will, which I think is we refer to AI here at Abarca as healthcare intelligence, right? We don't think of it as something that dehumanizes, but rather humanizes. So when you think about the friction within the system, and specifically in PBM, there are still numerous processes that still require where the wait times are related to manual process, but well beyond just automation, right? A lot more decision making. Some of it very, in a very high order of complexity, but some of it not so much, right? And so, for us, we think about where are all the opportunities to start compressing that, like Bertil was alluding to. How do we compress the timeline? Because when we think about how to give better care, a lot of it is timeliness and and accuracy and efficiency, right? And so reducing costs for us, if we can get the answers faster with higher level or higher degree of accuracy, the patient wins, which is the key. It's really important to us, and I think it's important to everybody in healthcare. That's why we're here at the end of the day. And so, specific use cases for us, as we've mentioned PA already, but there's a number of others, a litany of others where we can actually focus and around things like predictive, beyond predictive and analytics, but rather, determining, patterns that we currently today are very difficult to spot, right? But still might have very material consequences, especially when we look at the cost of medication today, which in some cases can be as high as $2 million a dose, right? These are things that are now, real concerns, right, for patients, for payers, for PBMs, right? Those costs ultimately get passed down to patients. So anything that we can do to optimize that is obviously going to be very welcome.
Mhm. So whenever we think of AI, we think of, okay, speed and efficiency and accuracy. And along with that, there is this fear that it will make certain job functions obsolete. Um, Ton, maybe you can address, is that fear of my job is going to be replaced by AI? Is that fear warranted in healthcare?
Well, depending what day you ask me, you get a yes or a no, right? Depending what client or what people I've been talking to. So it's not a straightforward answer. But I think in the short term, I think what's happening is, I don't think it in the short term will replace jobs per se, but it will replace tasks. So it will shift some of the tasks. So things that will go away is a lot of repeatable tasks, right? Things that you now do, but it will go more to quality control, dispute resolutions, maybe more patient facing time, right? So I think that the role stays, but the task will change. That's kind of in my mind the bigger deal. The other one is there will be some impact, right? If you think about, and it's not just healthcare, but in general, right? It's the repetitive, administrative, high volume tasks, right? That will probably be highly impacted over time. But a lot of these folks will shift into, what I said, appeals and other complex cases that AI is not ready for, right? So there will be kind of a shift. But I do think on that side there will be some loss. But it's also up to the human, right, to get trained. I think it was the American Medical Association that's basically saying training their people to become more AI literate, right,
Right.
and get workflow fluency. So instead of just saying, yeah, I give up, learn about AI, learn about
Right.
the weaknesses and the strengths. So that will make then you become a stronger participant and you don't have to be scared. You use it as a tool. And I think that's the right approach, because what you don't want to do is have all these people say, oh, I'm going to become a data engineer, right? Or a data scientist, because we don't have people to do the work anymore. That's not what you want, but you want people to actually embrace it, understand it, know the risks. And if you know the strengths and weaknesses, you can make it valuable to yourself. And I think that is where it happens. But there definitely will be a shift. Now, one of the things that people talk about it for years ago was radiology, right? Where we look at images and AI will scan, and it's very good. But here's one thing that we said, oh, AI is going to replace this whole specialty. The reality is it's largely a support tooling right now, right? And it also creates work because there's a lot of false positives. There's a lot of oversight and integration needed. So I think radiology is using it the right way as an augmentation tool. But again, they also are very much aware in that specialty, because they've been doing it for a long time, that don't get over reliant on AI. Don't get lazy as a human, right? Stay alert, because it's very easy to get that automation bias and kind of, automatically check, validate. And that's the risk. But I think it's a mixed bag. Lower end, yes, there will be some pressure. We still need quality folks, and we're gonna there's a shift in tasks, right? The role stays, different tasks will be added. That's how I'm hearing it in the market.
Bertil and Serge, do you agree that it is, there'd be some pressure, but if you are able to retrain yourself into leveraging AI more smartly, then perhaps you will not fall victim?
Look, the last two big technology waves, right? An industrial revolution and the whole internet wave created net new jobs.
Right.
Now, there's no guarantee. The past is not a guarantee of the future, and this time it could be different because we're talking about replacing human intelligence.
Right.
But if you looked, 30 years ago, 40% of jobs in the US did not exist. So I think what AI is going to do is refactor the workforce. And I think there will be a lot of wealth, the economy will grow because of the productivity benefits. There will be some hard transition. There will be a hard transition phase, but there will be net new jobs created. They will just be very different jobs. And I think, Ton alluded to it with, the quality aspect of the jobs. I can imagine a whole new slew of roles that have to do with monitoring agents and validating outputs and doing all sorts of work that just don't exist today, right? So I think, again, if I were a betting man, I would say net new jobs, a refactoring of tasks and jobs to create fundamentally new roles that you probably won't recognize today, and similar to the past.
So, Serge, I want you to comment on the idea of certain hard transitions. Sorry, I'm giving you the hardest question here, but for example, in the healthcare industry spends millions of dollars, payers and providers, in medical coding, right? In claims process adjustment. If AI comes in and does it accurately, that medical coding job, that human scribe who used to take notes in the patient provider encounter, those two roles are largely obsolete. No, am I wrong, or what?
No,
what is your?
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I think like Priscilla was saying, and Ton also alluded to, right, is that certain functions will likely be either replaced or accelerated to a point where the volume of individuals required to do it today will change, right? I guess the way I would look at it is, we went from using shovels to using backhoes to be able to do construction, but there's still probably just as many construction workers today as there was before. It's just that we can produce more in less time. And so, similarly to, not only do we see a shift, or will there be a shift in what the roles are and the responsibilities, but who's to say today that we are delivering at 100% efficiency in treating people's conditions in the healthcare market as only one of many, many areas that will be impacted by this. I think there's people still waiting in the waiting room. There's still people that don't get the care they need when they need it, that probably don't get the support that they need when they need it. If we could accelerate, that would still require people to have those enablers to be able to deliver more. And you still have to have more people, right, to achieve that. So cost-wise, I think we'll get a balancing and just ultimately better services. At some point in time, yes, I guess when the Toyota production system came along and robots took over the assembly lines and, of car manufacturing, they clearly job shifted. But, I'm aligned, at least today, on these waves, creating opportunity more than necessarily scarcity. So I think that we will see a lot of benefits for everyone at the end of the day. And we're very good as human beings, right, to find some ways to keep ourselves busy. I like to say, work expands to take the time allotted to it. If there's more time, we'll do more things, right? So I think it's a good thing for us in the long term.
On that hopeful note, I want to end with some lighthearted stuff. I'll go myself. I'm curious about how each of you are using AI in your daily lives. I'm terrible at math, and if there is some change in cooking ingredients and I have to figure out the measurements, I just put it in Chat GPT and it tells me, all right, if this is a half cup, then this needs to be 3/4 cup. So I am very thankful to OpenAI for that. You go second. What's one interesting use of AI you do in your life? And it could be work stuff too.
It's wow. It's actually a very hard question, because I think it is so everywhere that I'm not even sure that I realize if I use AI or not at times. On the work side, let me do this. On the work side, I use AI to validate my own assumptions, right? So if I'm thinking about something, I have AI, simple prompts, kind of, does it make sense? Am I not, missing something, just to kind of infuse that. I think that's great. Normally, I would send it to a person. They would, look it over. Hey, Tom, you're smoking something, right? Smile, you're on camera. But you know, but from a personal side, really is that I'm a terrible planner. So when we take trips, vacation, right now, AI will plan it for me, where to go, how long does it take me to get there. It's just a laziness. I
It
can
is.
easily do it with a few clicks, but it takes all the pressure away. And I'm like, you see, I did it. I planned it.
All right, good for you.
Cheating
But
is a bit of it there.
please, go ahead.
Yeah, mine is so the other day I was stuck at JFK with a big flight delay, and I had heard of this application called Flighty, and I went, and it allowed me to basically get on the flight. It predicted what was going to happen uh, with that
Wow.
flight, other flights, etc. And I was able to make, everybody was scrambling, and I was sitting there with Flighty, and I made it onto a flight that made it back to San Juan with just an hour and a half delay. And then I had heard of the application, et cetera. I didn't know how it worked. I went and I looked at how it's actually built, and it's pretty amazing, right? I mean, the thing is essentially taking all the data on weather, flight, where the flights are coming in and going to, and essentially it predicts flight delays much better than any airline. And
Wow.
you're sitting there at the airport, and you essentially have, an AI agent working all the data in the nation, all to help you get on to the next flight. And it had a real impact on my ability to get to my house and my own bed, right, on time. So
And it's a free application?
it is, with obviously all sorts of bells and whistles that you can pay for, but anyway, I thought it was a super cool application of AI to help with a real problem
Yep.
in a way where you're now empowered more than anything you would get from your own airline.
Mhm.
So I thought it was a good analogy of the
Excellent.
power
I
of
love
this stuff.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Serge, can you beat that?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. Like, to be honest, it's
But
I even though we work extensively with AI and we're using the solutions, right, to solve a lot of problems, and we're engineering around it. In the day to day, I'll say I'm sort of I stick to mostly the generative AI, and probably a lot like Ton, it's kind of a sounding board, right? It's to go out and just put ideas together and expand on them quickly. It's one of the things that even though we started when I was going to college, you had to go to the library and actually go read books and things. And along came Google and all these other things. But now, I don't want to say it's a superpowered search, because I think that's a massive underestimation of its ability. It's more about like taking, ideas and expanding upon them like you would with like, somebody that you trust that you can talk to. I don't take the answers verbatim, but it's very interesting to be able to even have strategic conversations around where this is going and bring in information from other organizations, and really, kind of similar to what Flighty is doing for flights, is to just really have a very ubiquitous view of what's going on in the world, right? Because these models have been trained on so much information. So yeah, I kind of feel like I'm having competitive arguments with with ChatGPT on a regular basis, because I'm often having to tell it like, no, that doesn't make sense. No, that's not the right answer. So I think it's helping me stay sharp as well, and also be able to bolster an understanding of what it can or cannot do, so that we can not, Pollyannishly solve problems by thinking that, again, similar to the hype at the beginning of the conversation, it's not the silver bullet. It doesn't have all the answers. There's still a requirement to understand the scope and limit the scope of what you're asking. So that's kind of where I've been hopefully sharpening the axe for myself, in understanding how I can then apply that to solutions that will be engineered for healthcare and for PBM in the future.
Perfect. Well, thank you for that really wonderful discussion. I just learned a lot. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.